They said Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez was too soft for special operations, too gentle for the kill-or-be-killed reality of asymmetric warfare. By dawn, 12 enemy combatants would be dead by her hand, and the doubters would never question. Her lethality again, preparing and narrating this type of story, took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The pre-dawn air in Kandahar Province carried the metallic taste of dust and diesel fuel, thick enough to coat the back of Elena's throat as she crouched behind a crumbling concrete barrier. Her breath came in controlled, measured draws, each exhale barely disturbing the layer of fine sand that had settled across her rifle's scope during the 3-hour approach march. The compound ahead sat in artificial silence, a sprawling maze of mud brick walls and corrugated metal roofing that housed what intelligence claimed was a high-value target and his personal security detail. Sweat traced cold lines down her spine. Beneath the ceramic plates of her body armor, not from heat, but from the hyper-awareness that came before contact. Every shadow seemed to shift with potential threat. Every breath of wind through the sparse vegetation sounded amplified in the stillness. The night vision optics painted everything in stark green and black contrasts, turning the familiar world into something alien and predatory. Elena's gloved fingers rested lightly on her weapon selector switch, muscle memory keeping the safety engaged while her mind calculated distances, angles, and reaction times. 23 meters to the nearest cover, 47 to the compound's outer wall. Wind barely registering on the improvised range flag hanging limp from a distant antenna mast. The mathematics of violence, precise and clinical, overlaid across terrain that would soon become a killing field. Behind her, 300 meters back in the designated overwatch position, the rest of Alpha Team maintained radio silence. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had made his opinions clear during the mission briefing. Elena was too hesitant, too concerned with collateral damage assessments, too willing to exhaust non-lethal options before escalating to deadly force. The kind of softness that got people killed in the unforgiving arithmetic of asymmetric warfare. Colonel Matthews had listened to the criticism with the patience of a career officer who had heard similar debates countless times before, then assigned Elena as primary operator anyway. The decision hadn't been popular. Martinez had openly questioned whether Elena possessed the killer instinct necessary for solo infiltration work. Thompson had wondered aloud if her psychological profile indicated excessive empathy for a direct action specialist. Even Captain Reyes, who had recommended Elena for special operations training, had privately expressed concerns about her tendency to seek de-escalation opportunities in high-stress scenarios. None of them understood that Elena's apparent softness masked something far more dangerous than conventional aggression. While other operators relied on adrenaline and overwhelming firepower, Elena had developed something more sustainable and infinitely more precise. She had learned to channel maternal protectiveness into lethal efficiency, transforming her instinct to nurture and shield into an uncompromising willingness to eliminate threats to those under her protection. The compound showed signs of habitation despite the late hour. Faint light leaked around the edges of blackout curtains in 2 ground floor windows. A generator hummed somewhere beyond the western wall, its diesel engine cycling with mechanical regularity. Cooking smoke drifted from a chimney, carrying the scent of charcoal and cumin across the open ground. Intelligence had indicated 12 to 15 enemy personnel, heavily armed and operating under the protection of a local power broker who had been facilitating attacks against coalition supply. Convoys. Elena shifted her weight slightly, feeling the familiar press of equipment against her body. 43 pounds of gear distributed across her frame with the precision of long practice. Every piece of equipment had been selected, tested, and positioned for maximum effectiveness and minimum interference with movement. Her sidearm rode high on her right thigh, secured but accessible. Extra magazines nestled in their pouches with their brass facing down and forward for smooth extraction. Medical supplies filled the left cargo pocket of her trousers, organized by priority of use rather than convenience of storage. The night had teeth tonight. Elena could feel it in the way the air moved, carrying sounds farther than normal while simultaneously muffling others. Temperature inversion, probably. The kind of atmospheric condition that could make voices carry across impossible distances while rendering footsteps nearly silent. Weather that favored the patient and punished the hasty. She had been watching the compound for 97 minutes, long enough to identify patterns in the movement of guards, to note which windows showed regular activity, to map the likely location of sleeping quarters based on the distribution of light and sound. Long enough to become part of the landscape, another shadow among shadows, another irregularity in terrain that had seen decades of conflict. The criticism from her peers hadn't stung because it was unfair. It stung because there was truth in. Elena did hesitate. She did seek alternatives to lethal force. She did carry the weight of every life she had taken, friendly and enemy alike, in ways that seemed to separate her from the operators who could kill with mechanical efficiency and sleep soundly afterward. But that hesitation, that weight, had never prevented her from pulling the trigger when circumstances demanded it. What her critics missed was that Elena's reluctance to kill made her more dangerous, not less. Every target she engaged had been thoroughly assessed, every angle considered, every alternative exhausted. When Elena finally committed to lethal force, it came with the crushing finality of absolute certainty. There were no second thoughts, no hesitation, no mercy for those who had earned her complete attention. The compound's main gate was steel sheeting welded to a framework of angle iron, hung from posts that had been reinforced with concrete and rebar, practical rather than aesthetic, designed to stop vehicles rather than small arms fire. A weakness if approached from the correct angle with the appropriate tools. But Elena had no intention of using the gate. The intelligence packet had included architectural drawings, obtained through sources she preferred not to contemplate, showing a drainage culvert that passed beneath the compound's eastern wall. Her radio earpiece carried nothing but the soft static of encrypted silence. Alpha Team would maintain communications blackout until she either completed the mission or triggered the emergency extraction protocol. Standard operating procedure for solo infiltration missions, designed to prevent radio chatter from compromising operational security. Elena preferred it that way. The constant stream of tactical updates and position reports that characterized larger operations had always felt like interference rather than assistance. Movement caught her peripheral vision. A guard emerged from the compound's main building, rifle slung across his back, moving with the casual posture of someone conducting routine security checks rather than responding to specific threats. Elena tracked him through her scope as he completed a circuit of the interior courtyard, noting his timing, his pattern, the way he favored his left leg slightly. Information to be filed away and potentially exploited later. The night was far from over. Elena had work to do, and by morning, the whispered doubts about her capability would be answered in the most definitive way possible. She settled deeper into her concealed position, becoming one with the shadows and the silence, and began the patient work of becoming death incarnate. Elena's movements began with the methodical precision of a surgeon, preparing for a complex operation. She removed her night vision monocular and placed it in its designated pouch. The action performed without looking, muscle memory guiding her fingers to the exact location, where the device would be secure yet instantly accessible. Her hands moved across her equipment with the same unconscious efficiency, checking retention straps, verifying magazine seating, confirming that every piece of gear remained exactly where it should be. The rifle came first. She performed a functions check by feel alone, her fingers tracing the bolt carrier's movement as she cycled the action with barely audible precision. The weapon's weight distributed perfectly across her grip, 47 months of training, and Kwantu deployment having calibrated her hands to recognize the exact balance point that indicated proper ammunition loading. She verified the optics 0 by aligning it with a reference point she had memorized during her initial reconnaissance, confirming that the scope's internal mechanisms hadn't shifted during the approach march. Her breathing settled into the rhythm she had learned during sniper training, not the exaggerated techniques taught to civilians, but the natural pattern that allowed for maximum oxygen efficiency while maintaining the stillness necessary for precision shooting. 4 counts in through the nose, 6 counts out through barely parted lips, with a natural pause between breaths that coincided with her body's stillest moment. It was during these pauses that Elena could detect the subtle changes in her environment that indicated approaching threats or shifting tactical situations. The compound's eastern wall showed the wear pattern she had studied in the architectural drawings. Water damage had weakened the mud brick construction near ground level, creating subtle depressions where seasonal flooding had eroded the foundation. More importantly, the drainage culvert mentioned in the intelligence brief was visible as a dark semicircle near the wall's base, partially concealed by accumulated debris and wild vegetation that had taken root in the disturbed soil. Elena began her approach using a movement technique she had perfected during mountain warfare training in Colorado. Each step was placed with deliberate care, weight distributed gradually to avoid creating the sharp pressure changes that could dislodge loose stones or snap dried vegetation. Her boots, specially modified with softer rubber soles, made contact with the ground in a rolling motion that dispersed impact energy across a broader surface area. The technique was exhausting, requiring constant attention to foot placement and weight distribution, but it allowed for nearly silent movement across terrain that would betray a careless operator's position with every step. 20 meters. 15. The compound's perimeter security became more apparent as Elena closed the distance. Motion sensors mounted on the wall's upper edge, their infrared emitters casting invisible beams across likely approach routes. A simple but effective system, probably installed by private contractors who understood the importance of early warning systems in hostile territory. Elena had anticipated this possibility during her mission planning phase, carrying equipment specifically designed to defeat such measures. She stopped at the edge of the sensor network's effective range and extracted a small electronic device from her chest pouch. The frequency scanner was military-grade hardware, capable of identifying and analyzing the electromagnetic signatures of common security systems. Elena activated it with a single button press, then waited as it cycled through detection protocols. Its display showing wavelength, patterns and soft green numerals that were barely visible even at close range. The readout confirmed her suspicions. Dual-beam infrared sensors operating on the standard commercial frequency, with backup power supplies and wireless connectivity to an interior monitoring station. Sophisticated enough to detect most infiltration attempts, but vulnerable to specific countermeasures that Elena had practiced extensively during urban warfare training exercises. She retrieved a second device, this one resembling a small flashlight with an adjustable lens assembly. The infrared illuminator was designed to overwhelm the sensor's detection capability by flooding them with the same wavelength of light they used for intrusion detection. Elena adjusted the beam width to match the estimated coverage area of the nearest sensor, then activated the device while simultaneously moving into the sensor's detection zone. The technique required precise timing. Too early, and the illuminator's signature might be detected by monitoring equipment. Too late, and her movement would trigger an alarm before the countermeasure could take effect. Elena had practiced this maneuver countless times in training scenarios, but never under operational conditions where failure would result in immediate enemy contact. She crossed the sensor barrier without triggering any audible alarms, though she remained aware that silent notification systems might have alerted interior guards to a possible perimeter breach. The next phase of her infiltration would need to proceed on the assumption that her presence was known or suspected, requiring even greater care and tactical awareness. The drainage culvert proved more challenging than the architectural drawings had suggested. Accumulated debris had partially blocked the opening, forcing Elena to clear away stones and rotted vegetation before attempting entry. Each piece of debris was removed with careful attention to noise discipline, placed gently aside rather than simply pushed away. The work was slow and methodical, but rushing would create the kind of disturbance that experienced guards would immediately recognize as human-caused rather than natural. Elena tested the culvert's interior dimensions by extending her arm into the opening. The space was barely wide enough to accommodate her shoulders, with rough concrete walls that would scrape against her equipment during passage. She would need to remove some gear to fit through the opening, then retrieve it once she had emerged on the compound's interior side. Another risk, another complication, but one she had prepared for during her mission planning phase. She detached her assault pack and pushed it ahead of her into the culvert, using a length of parachute cord to maintain control of the equipment, while preventing it from creating noise as it moved through the concrete passage. Her rifle followed, secured to her body with a retention strap that would prevent loss while allowing for rapid deployment once she emerged on the far side. The culvert's interior was a claustrophobic tube of rough concrete and accumulated sediment. Elena propelled herself forward using her elbows and knees, feeling sharp edges catch at her clothing and equipment with each movement. Water seeped through cracks in the concrete, creating a thin layer of mud that coated her uniform and filled her boots with cold moisture. The air was thick with the smell of stagnant water and decades of accumulated organic matter. Halfway through the passage, Elena encountered an obstruction that hadn't appeared in the architectural drawings. A section of the concrete had partially collapsed, reducing the culvert's diameter to barely 18 inches. She would need to remove additional equipment to squeeze through the restriction, increasing her vulnerability during the most dangerous phase of the infiltration. Elena detached her ceramic armor plates and pushed them ahead of her, followed by her ammunition pouches and medical supplies. Each item was carefully positioned and secured to prevent loss or damage, but their removal left her protected only by the ballistic fabric of her uniform shirt. If she encountered enemy fire during the next few minutes, her survival would depend entirely on speed and tactics rather than protective equipment. The restriction scraped against her shoulders and back as she forced herself through the narrowest section, concrete edges tearing small holes in her uniform and abrading the skin beneath. Elena ignored the discomfort, focusing instead on maintaining silence while navigating the obstacle. On the far side, she methodically retrieved and reattached her equipment, transforming herself from vulnerable infiltrator back into a fully equipped special operations soldier. She emerged from the culvert into a storage area filled with empty fuel drums and agricultural equipment. The smell of diesel fuel and machine oil provided perfect camouflage for any scents she might have carried from outside the compound. Elena remained motionless for several minutes, listening for any indication that her infiltration had been detected. Before beginning to move toward the compound's main structures, the intelligence briefing had been delivered 18 hours earlier. In a windowless room beneath the main operations center, fluorescent lighting casting harsh shadows across satellite, photographs and hand-drawn floor plans spread across a metal table. Major Harrison had presided over the session with the detached professionalism of an officer who had delivered similar briefings dozens of times before, his voice carrying no emotion as he outlined the mission parameters that would determine whether Elena lived or died before sunrise. The target was Qasim Al-Rashid, a former Syrian army officer who had transitioned seamlessly from government service to private warfare. selling his tactical expertise to the highest bidder while maintaining a network of contacts that stretched from Aleppo to Kandahar. Intelligence indicated that Al-Rashid was personally responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition supply convoys, using his knowledge of military procedures to identify vulnerabilities in escort protocols and communication systems. 12 convoy attacks in the past 6 months, resulting in 43 coalition casualties and millions of dollars in destroyed equipment. More concerning was Al-Rashid's recent acquisition of advanced weaponry, including guided anti-tank missiles and encrypted communication equipment that suggested support from state-level actors. His compound had become a coordination center for insurgent activities across 3 provinces, with evidence indicating that he was planning a major operation against the coalition airbase at Bagram. Intelligence sources suggested that the attack would occur within 72 hours, using intelligence Al-Rashid had obtained through compromised local interpreters. The mission was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its complexity. Elena would infiltrate Al-Rashid's compound during the hours before dawn, when guard rotations were most predictable and human alertness was naturally diminished. She would locate and eliminate Al-Rashid along with his senior lieutenants, destroy his communications equipment and operational files, then exfiltrate before sunrise. No backup, no extraction team, no margin for error. What made the mission particularly challenging was Al-Rashid's security arrangements. Unlike typical high-value targets who relied on geographic isolation or overwhelming firepower for protection, Al-Rashid had invested in professional security personnel, former military operators who understood coalition tactics and training methods. His compound housed between 12 and 15 guards, all experienced in urban warfare and equipped with night vision devices, advanced communications equipment, and crew-served weapons capable of engaging helicopter extraction attempts. Elena understood why she had been selected for the mission, despite the doubts expressed by her colleagues. Al-Rashid's security team would be prepared for conventional assault tactics, expecting overwhelming firepower and coordinated team movements. They would not be prepared for a single operator who could move through their perimeter like smoke, eliminating targets with surgical precision while avoiding the kind of sustained firefight that would alert reinforcements or compromise the missions. Intelligence valued out the compound's layout, favored her approach. Intelligence photographs showed a main residential building where Al-Rashid maintained his living quarters and primary office, connected by covered walkways to secondary structures that housed his security personnel and communications equipment. The arrangement created natural choke points and isolated zones where Elena could engage targets without immediately alerting the entire security force to her presence. She had studied the photographs until every detail was permanently etched in her memory. The main building's entrance faced west, with a heavy wooden door reinforced by steel plating. 2 windows on the ground floor, both equipped with security bars, but positioned to allow observation of the compound's interior courtyard. An external staircase led to second-floor quarters where Al-Rashid was believed to sleep, protected by at least 2 bodyguards who maintained constant vigilance during nighttime. Hours out, the security barracks occupied the compound's northern section, a converted warehouse that had been subdivided into sleeping quarters and a common area where off-duty guards maintained weapons and monitored surveillance equipment. Intelligence indicated that the building contained backup generators, communication relays, and an armory stocked with enough weapons and ammunition to sustain extended combat operations. Elena's approach would require her to neutralize the perimeter. Guards first, eliminating external security without alerting interior personnel to her presence. The compound's eastern wall, where she had just completed her infiltration, offered the best concealment for this phase of the operation. From there, she could work her way around the perimeter, engaging isolated guards while maintaining visual contact with the main buildings to monitor for any indication that her activities had been detected. The mission's success depended entirely on maintaining the element of surprise for as long as possible. Each guard eliminated would reduce the compound's overall security capability, but would also increase the likelihood that subsequent targets would be alerted to her presence. Elena would need to work quickly and efficiently, eliminating threats in a sequence that minimized the possibility of survivors raising an alarm, while maximizing her ability to reach Al-Rashid before his security team could organize an effective response. She carried specialized equipment selected specifically for K4. This type of operation. Her primary weapon was a suppressed carbine configured for close-quarters combat, with subsonic ammunition that would minimize noise signature while maintaining sufficient stopping power for reliable target elimination. A sound suppressor reduced the weapon's acoustic signature to barely more than the noise produced by the weapon's mechanical action, allowing for multiple engagements without immediately revealing her position to distant targets. Her sidearm was similarly configured, with a compact suppressor and high-capacity magazines loaded with expanding ammunition, designed for maximum terminal effectiveness. Elena had trained extensively with both weapons, practicing rapid transitions between targets and reloading procedures until the movements became as natural as breathing. She could engage multiple targets in sequence, maintaining accuracy while moving between firing positions. Without conscious thought about weapon manipulation or ammunition management, the compound's interior was dimly lit by solar-powered security lighting, creating pools of illumination separated by areas of deep shadow that would provide concealment during her movement between objectives. Elena had memorized the lighting pattern during her external reconnaissance, identifying routes that would allow her to move from shadow to shadow, while maintaining visual contact with potential targets and escape routes. Her night vision equipment provided significant advantages over opponents who relied on conventional lighting and naked eye observation. While Al-Rashid's guards possessed night vision devices, they would likely be using them intermittently to preserve battery life and avoid the eye fatigue that resulted from extended use of artificial image enhancement. Elena's equipment was powered by lithium batteries that would maintain full functionality for the duration of the mission, allowing her to operate with consistent visual advantages throughout the engagement. The mission's timeline was compressed but manageable. Intelligence indicated that Al-Rashid typically retired to his quarters around midnight, remaining there until morning prayers at approximately 5:30. His bodyguards maintained rotating watches, with personnel changes occurring every 2 hours to maintain alertness levels. The compound's external guards followed similar rotation schedules, creating brief windows of opportunity when individual positions might be undermanned or occupied by personnel who were not yet fully alert. Elena checked her chronometer. 0230. Hours local time. She had approximately 3 hours to complete the entire operation before dawn increased the visibility of her activities and reduced her tactical advantages. 3 hours to eliminate 12 to 15 trained security personnel, locate and kill Al-Rashid, destroy his operational materials, and escape the compound before reinforcements could arrive from nearby insurgent safe houses. The storage area where she had emerged provided perfect concealment while she completed her final preparations. Elena conducted a systematic equipment check, verifying that every piece of gear remained properly secured and immediately accessible. Her movements were economical and purposeful, each action performed with the precision of long practice and absolute concentration on the lethal work that lay ahead. Elena's final radio check confirmed what she had expected. Static filled her earpiece. The encrypted signal from Alpha Team's overwatch position, blocked by the compound's walls, and the deliberate radio silence that would be maintained until mission completion or emergency extraction. She reached up and switched off her communications equipment entirely, removing the last technological link to friendly forces and the safety net of potential support. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of her own controlled breathing and the distant hum of the compound's generator. She moved from the storage area with the fluid precision of water flowing around obstacles, each step calculated to avoid the scattered debris that could betray her presence with an ill-timed sound. The compound's interior revealed details that had been invisible from her external observation position. Laundry hung from improvised lines between buildings, civilian clothing mixed with military-style garments that suggested Al-Rashid's operation included both combatants and support personnel. Children's toys lay abandoned in a corner of the courtyard, a stark reminder that this facility served as both fortress and home. The first guard appeared exactly where intelligence had predicted, positioned near the compound's main water storage tank with a clear view of the eastern approaches. He stood with the relaxed posture of someone conducting routine security duties rather than responding to specific threats, his rifle slung across his chest while he smoked a cigarette that glowed orange in the darkness. Elena observed him through her rifle scope, noting his positioning, his equipment, and the timing of his movements as he completed a lazy circuit around his assigned sector. She had studied this moment extensively during mission planning, gaming out dozens of scenarios for eliminating the first target without alerting others to her presence. The guard's position offered both advantages and complications. His location provided excellent concealment for Elena's approach, but also meant that his absence would be quickly noticed by anyone monitoring the compound's security arrangements. She would need to eliminate him and immediately move to engage additional targets before his failure to respond to radio checks could trigger a general alarm. Elena selected her approach route with the care of a chess master contemplating a critical move. The compound's layout created natural concealment in the form of shadows cast by storage containers and architectural features, but moving between these positions would require crossing areas of relative exposure where detection would mean immediate and overwhelming enemy response. She identified 3 intermediate positions that would allow her to close the distance, while maintaining tactical options for withdrawal if the situation deteriorated. The movement began with a low crouch that kept her profile beneath the sight lines of elevated positions while allowing for rapid acceleration if immediate escape became necessary. Elena's modified boots made no sound as they contacted the packed earth of the compound's interior, her weight distributed carefully to avoid creating pressure changes that might be detected by experienced sentries. Each step was followed by a pause during which she listened for any indication that her movement had been observed or that the compound's security posture was changing. 20 meters became 15, then 10. The guard remained focused on his assigned sector, unaware that death was approaching from his blind spot with surgical precision. Elena could see the details of his equipment now. A Soviet-era assault rifle that had been well maintained despite its age. A tactical vest that showed signs of recent combat use, and night vision goggles that hung unused around his neck. His cigarette continued to glow as he drew on it, the brief illumination destroying his natural night vision and masking any sounds Elena might make during her final approach. She closed the remaining distance in a movement that combined speed with absolute silence, her hands already positioned for the technique she had practiced hundreds of times during close-quarters combat training. The guard never heard her approach. One moment he was enjoying his cigarette break, the next he was unconscious, his body lowering gently to the ground under Elena's control to prevent any sound that might alert nearby personnel. She checked his pulse to confirm unconsciousness rather than death. This guard would awaken hours later with a headache, but no permanent damage. Elena's decision to use non-lethal force reflected a tactical calculation rather than squeamishness about killing. A missing guard would eventually trigger security protocols, but a dead body would create immediate alarm and potentially compromise the entire mission. She secured the unconscious man's weapons and communication equipment, then moved his body to a position where it would be concealed from casual observation, while appearing to be a sentry who had briefly stepped away from his post. The compound's interior revealed additional challenges that had not been apparent from external reconnaissance. Motion-activated lighting systems were positioned to illuminate key approach routes, requiring Elena to modify her planned movement patterns to avoid triggering automatic responses that would flood her position with artificial illumination. She identified alternative routes that utilized fixed shadows and architectural features, though these paths would require more time and exposure to observation from different angles. A second guard emerged from the main building, following a patrol route that brought him directly toward Elena's position. She had perhaps 30 seconds before their paths would intersect, insufficient time to reach concealment and too little distance to avoid detection if she remained in place. Elena made the split-second decision that separated trained operators from amateurs. Instead of seeking to avoid contact, she would control it. She positioned herself behind a concrete pillar that supported an overhead walkway, weapon-ready but not immediately visible to the approaching guard. As he rounded the corner, Elena stepped into his path with the confidence of someone who belonged in the compound, speaking in accented Arabic that she had practiced until it sounded natural. "Brother, have you seen Mahmoud? The captain wants to speak with him." The guard's response confirmed Elena's assessment of the compound's security culture. He replied without suspicion, indicating that personnel moved freely between positions and that casual conversation between guards was normal, rather than unusual. This intelligence would prove valuable as she moved deeper into the facility and encountered additional personnel who might question her presence. Elena maintained the conversation just long enough to position herself optimally, then eliminated the second guard with the same precise technique she had used on the first. 2 targets neutralized without raising an alarm, but she understood that her tactical advantages were diminishing with each engagement. The compound security personnel would eventually notice that guards were not responding to radio checks or failing to appear at designated positions. She needed to accelerate her timeline and begin engaging primary targets before her presence became known to Al-Rashid's inner circle. The main building loomed ahead, its windows showing faint light that indicated occupied rooms and active personnel. Elena could see shadows moving behind curtained windows, suggesting that at least some of the compound's residents remained awake despite the late hour. Intelligence had indicated that Al-Rashid maintained irregular sleep patterns, often working through the night on operational planning and communication with distant associates. There was a reasonable possibility that he would be alert and protected by his personal bodyguards. Elena checked her equipment one final time, confirming ammunition loads and verifying that her specialized breaching tools remained properly secured and immediately accessible. The next phase of the operation would require her to enter enclosed spaces, where tactical flexibility would be limited and where any mistake would result in close quarters combat against multiple opponents who possessed intimate knowledge of the terrain. She approached the main building's entrance with heightened awareness, noting the quality of construction and the presence of reinforced door frames that suggested the structure had been modified specifically for security purposes. The entrance was equipped with multiple locking mechanisms and showed evidence of ballistic protection, indicating that Al-Rashid took his personal security seriously and had invested significant resources in hardening his primary residence. Moment had arrived for Elena to transition from infiltration to direct action, to move from the shadows where she held every advantage into the interior spaces where Al-Rashid waited with his remaining guards. She was alone now in the truest sense, separated from any possibility of support or extraction, committed to completing the mission through her own skill and determination. The compound had become her world, and she would reshape it according to her will. The main building's entrance presented Elena with her first serious tactical challenge. The reinforced door was secured by an electronic locking system that had not appeared in the intelligence photographs. its LED display showing a steady red light that indicated active security protocols. Beside the lock, a small camera lens gleamed, dully in the darkness, positioned to record anyone attempting unauthorized entry. Elena realized that the compound's security arrangements were more sophisticated than anticipated, requiring immediate adaptation of her infiltration plan. She crouched beside the entrance and extracted a compact electronic device from her utility pouch, its brushed aluminum casing no larger than a smartphone but containing circuitry that represented months of development by military intelligence technicians. The device was designed to defeat common electronic security systems by analyzing their operational frequencies and generating appropriate override signals. Elena connected it to the door's locking mechanism using a specialized cable, then activated the scanning sequence while monitoring the surrounding area for any indication that her activities had been detected. The process required agonizing patience. Each electronic pulse generated by the device created the possibility of triggering security alarms or alerting monitoring personnel to attempted intrusion. Elena counted 67 seconds before the device's display showed successful analysis of the lock's control system, followed by another 43 seconds while it generated the appropriate override signal. During this time, she remained acutely aware that discovery would result in immediate and overwhelming enemy response from which there would be no escape. The lock disengaged with a barely audible click, its LED display switching from red to green. As the electronic deadbolt retracted into its housing, Elena disconnected her device and returned it to its designated pouch, then carefully tested the door's movement to ensure that its hinges would not create noise during opening. The door swung inward on well-oiled pivots, revealing a dimly lit corridor that extended toward the building's interior. She entered the structure with her weapon in the low-ready position, muzzle oriented toward potential threats while maintaining the ability to rapidly engage targets in any direction. The corridor was carpeted with thick material that would muffle footsteps, but Elena continued to move with deliberate care, placing each step to avoid creating any sound that might penetrate to adjacent rooms. The air inside was thick with cigarette smoke and the lingering odors of cooked food, evidence of recent occupancy that suggested personnel remained active despite the late hour. 3 doors opened off the main corridor, their positions matching the layout Elena had memorized during mission planning. The first led to what intelligence indicated was a storage room used for weapons and ammunition. The second provided access to a communications center where Al-Rashid maintained contact with his network of associates and operational cells. The third opened onto a staircase leading to the second floor, where the target maintained his personal quarters and conducted sensitive meetings with senior lieutenants. Elena had planned to proceed directly to the upper level, but movement behind the communications room door forced an immediate tactical decision. She could hear voices speaking in low tones, punctuated by the electronic sounds of radio equipment and computer keyboards. At least 2 people, possibly 3, working at tasks that required their continuous attention and would prevent them from monitoring the building's general security. This presented both opportunity and danger. She could potentially eliminate multiple targets before they could raise an alarm, but any miscalculation would alert the entire compound to her presence. She approached the communications room door and listened carefully to the conversation within. 2 male voices, speaking Arabic with Syrian accents that matched intelligence profiles of Al-Rashid's senior communications personnel. They were discussing radio frequencies and encryption protocols, technical details that confirmed Elena's assessment that these were high-value targets whose elimination would significantly degrade the compound's operational capabilities. The door was not locked, suggesting that the occupants felt secure within the compound's perimeter and were not expecting threats from interior approaches. Elena tested the handle carefully, confirming that it would turn without resistance. Then began the delicate process of opening the door wide enough to observe the room's interior without alerting its occupants to her presence. Through the narrow gap, she could see two men seated at a table covered with radio equipment and laptop computers. Both were armed, their weapons within easy reach but not immediately ready for use. They appeared relaxed and focused on their work, unaware that their security perimeter had been compromised. A third chair suggested that additional personnel might return at any moment, requiring Elena to act quickly if she intended to engage these targets. Elena made her tactical decision with the calculated precision that had characterized her entire approach to the mission. She would eliminate both targets simultaneously, using techniques designed to prevent either man from raising an alarm or alerting other personnel to her presence. The engagement would need to be executed flawlessly. Any mistake would transform her stealth infiltration into a sustained firefight. Against superior numbers in unfamiliar terrain. She opened the door in a single smooth motion and entered the room with controlled aggression, her weapon oriented toward the nearest target while her peripheral vision tracked the second man's position and potential reaction. The first target looked up from his radio equipment with an expression of mild confusion rather than alarm, his mind requiring several critical seconds to process the reality that an armed intruder had appeared in what he had considered a secure location. Elena eliminated both threats in rapid succession, her suppressed weapon producing only the mechanical sounds of its action cycling and the soft impact of subsonic projectiles striking their targets. Neither man had time to react defensively or trigger any alarm systems. The engagement lasted less than 3 seconds from initiation to completion, leaving Elena in control of valuable intelligence equipment and eliminating 2 experienced operators who would have significantly complicated her mission if they had been allowed to organize defensive measures. She immediately began searching the communications equipment for intelligence materials that might prove valuable to coalition forces. The laptop computers were password protected, but Elena was able to retrieve several documents that had been left open on the desktop screens. Maps showing convoy routes and timing schedules, personnel rosters for insurgent cells operating in adjacent provinces, and communication protocols that would allow intelligence analysts to monitor enemy activities for weeks or months after the POTUS mission's completion. More importantly, she discovered a detailed schedule of Al-Rashid's activities that indicated he was currently meeting with senior lieutenants in his upstairs office rather than sleeping in his personal quarters. This intelligence forced Elena to revise her tactical approach, as engaging Al-Rashid while he was surrounded by bodyguards and advisors would be significantly more challenging than eliminating him while he was alone or with minimal protection. Elena photographed the most critical documents using a specialized camera that would upload the images to coalition intelligence databases via encrypted satellite transmission. The process required several minutes during which she remained vulnerable to discovery by other compound personnel, but the intelligence value of the materials justified the risk. She completed the documentation process and prepared to leave the communications room, but stopped when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Someone was approaching the room with the measured pace of routine rather than the urgency of emergency response. Elena positioned herself beside the door, weapon ready, and waited to determine whether the approaching person would enter the room or continue past to another destination. She could hear the footsteps slowing as they approached, followed by the sound of a key being inserted into the lock of an adjacent room. The sound indicated that compound personnel were moving freely through the building, conducting normal activities. That suggested her infiltration had not yet been detected. This provided tactical advantages but also increased the likelihood of chance encounters that could compromise her mission. Elena needed to reach Al-Rashid's location quickly before routine security procedures or simple bad luck created situations she could not control through preparation and skill alone. She left the communications room and moved toward the staircase, her confidence elevated by the successful completion of her first major tactical challenge, but her awareness heightened by the knowledge that greater obstacles lay ahead. The elimination of the communications personnel had been executed perfectly, but engaging Al-Rashid and his bodyguards would require different tactics and greater precision. Elena began climbing the stairs toward her primary objective, her mind, already calculating angles and approaches for the confrontation that would determine the mission's ultimate success or failure. The staircase revealed construction modifications that had not appeared in the architectural drawings Elena had studied. Steel reinforcement plates had been welded to the underside of each step, creating potential noise hazards that could alert upstairs personnel to her approach. More concerning were the pressure-sensitive alarm contacts she discovered embedded in the 3rd and 7th steps, their thin metal strips designed to trigger security alerts when subjected to human weight. Elena realized that Al-Rashid's security arrangements included countermeasures, specifically designed to detect infiltration attempts. She bypassed the trapped steps by distributing her weight across the staircase's support structure, using the steel reinforcement plates as improvised handholds, while keeping her boots in contact with the walls rather than the steps themselves. The technique required upper body strength and precise balance, forcing Elena to move much more slowly than her mission timeline permitted. Each movement had to be calculated and controlled, with any slip or miscalculation resulting in contact with the alarm sensors and immediate compromise of her position. Halfway up the staircase, Elena heard voices from the 2nd floor that indicated the meeting she had hoped to avoid was still in progress. At least 4 distinct speakers, their Arabic conversation mixing operational details with what sounded like heated disagreement about tactical priorities. She could distinguish Al-Rashid's voice among the others, his Syrian accent carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making final decisions about matters of life and death. The meeting was taking place in a room that intelligence had identified as Al-Rashid's private office. Directly adjacent to his sleeping quarters, Elena reached the upper landing and discovered additional complications that transformed her tactical situation from challenging to nearly impossible. The 2nd floor's layout differed significantly from the architectural drawings she had memorized. Where intelligence indicated a simple corridor connecting 3 rooms, Elena found a maze of partition walls and security barriers that had been installed to create defensive positions and limit access to Al-Rashid's quarters. The modifications were professionally executed, suggesting that Al-Rashid had employed experienced military engineers to redesign his living space as a hardened command bunker. Motion sensors mounted at ceiling level covered every approach route, their infrared beams creating invisible barriers that would be impossible to cross without triggering alarm systems. Unlike the simple perimeter sensors Elena had defeated during her initial infiltration, these devices were military-grade equipment connected to backup power supplies and redundant communication systems. Even if she could disable individual sensors, the security network would detect their failure and automatically initiate lockdown procedures. Elena studied the sensor network through her night vision scope, mapping the infrared beam patterns and identifying potential gaps in their coverage. The installation was sophisticated, but not perfect. The engineers had been forced to compromise between complete coverage and architectural limitations imposed by the building's existing structure. She identified a narrow corridor along the eastern wall where structural supports created blind spots in the sensor network. But reaching this route would require crossing 2 active detection zones without triggering alarms. The approach demanded precise timing coordinated with the natural movement of the building's structure. Elena waited for wind gusts that caused slight structural flexing, creating momentary gaps in the sensor coverage as mounting brackets shifted imperceptibly under load. She crossed the first detection zone during one of these brief windows. Her movements synchronized with the building's natural motion to avoid breaking the infrared beams at their normal operational angles. The voices from Al-Rashid's office grew louder as Elena approached, their conversation revealing details that significantly complicated her mission parameters. Al-Rashid was not simply planning the Bagram attack that intelligence had identified. He was coordinating simultaneous operations against 3 separate coalition bases using resources and personnel that exceeded previous assessments of his capabilities. The meeting included commanders from insurgent cells that were supposed to be operating independently, suggesting that Al-Rashid had achieved a level of organizational unity that posed strategic threats far beyond the tactical considerations of Elena's current mission. Elena photographed documents that had been spread across a table visible through the office doorway, using her specialized camera to capture operational plans and personnel rosters that would provide invaluable intelligence for coalition forces. The photography required her to maintain exposed positions for extended periods while the camera's automatic focusing system adjusted for distance and lighting conditions. During these vulnerable moments, discovery would result in immediate engagement at close quarters against multiple armed opponents who possessed intimate knowledge of the terrain. A new voice joined the conversation, speaking with the clipped precision of military training and discussing logistics that indicated fresh personnel had arrived at the compound within the past few hours. Elena realized that her intelligence about the facility's manning levels was outdated. Instead of the 12 to 15 guards she had prepared to face, the compound now housed significantly more personnel, including experienced fighters who had not been present during the reconnaissance phase of her mission planning. Elena's tactical situation deteriorated further when she heard footsteps approaching from the staircase she had just climbed. Someone was ascending to the 2nd floor, moving with the deliberate pace of routine patrol rather than emergency response. She had perhaps 60 seconds before the approaching guard would reach the landing and potentially discover evidence of her presence. The nearest concealment was a storage alcove that would provide temporary protection, but would also trap her in a dead-end position, with no escape route if her location was compromised. She made the tactical decision to continue advancing toward Al-Rashid's position rather than seeking concealment, calculating that aggressive forward movement offered better survival prospects than passive hiding. Elena crossed the final sensor barrier and reached the office entrance just as the guards' footsteps reached the upper landing. Through the partially open door, she could see Al-Rashid seated at a table surrounded by 5 armed men, their weapons within immediate reach and their positioning suggesting professional training in close protection procedures. The approaching guard called out a greeting in Arabic, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone conducting routine security checks rather than responding to specific threats. Al-Rashid responded without looking up from the documents he was reviewing, instructing the guard to check the communications room and ensure that radio contact with distant operational cells remained stable. Elena realized that the guard would discover the eliminated communications personnel within minutes, triggering immediate security alerts that would transform her stealth infiltration into a desperate fighting withdrawal. Elena's ammunition situation added another layer of complexity to her tactical calculations. She had expended several rounds during her previous engagements, leaving her primary weapon with sufficient ammunition for sustained combat, but not enough for the type of prolonged firefight that would result from simultaneous engagement with multiple skilled opponents. Her backup magazines were positioned for rapid access, but reloading under fire in confined spaces would create vulnerabilities that experienced fighters would immediately exploit. The office's interior layout presented additional challenges that would complicate any direct assault. Al-Rashid and his associates were positioned behind furniture that would provide ballistic protection while allowing them to return fire with overlapping fields of coverage. The room's dimensions limited Elena's movement options, while maximizing the defensive advantages of personnel who were familiar with the terrain and had prepared contingency plans for exactly this type of scenario. Elena heard the guard's footsteps, moving toward the staircase, beginning his descent to check the communications room as Al-Rashid had instructed. She estimated 90 seconds before he would discover the eliminated personnel, and perhaps another 30 seconds for him to process the situation and trigger security alerts. 2 minutes maximum before her mission would transition from stealth infiltration to direct action against overwhelming odds and disadvantageous terrain. The meeting in Al-Rashid's office continued with increasing intensity, their discussion revealing operational timelines that indicated the Bagram attack would commence within 18 hours rather than the 72-hour window that intelligence had estimated. Elena realized that her mission had become more than a targeted elimination. It was now a critical intervention that would determine whether hundreds of coalition personnel would face coordinated assault before they could implement appropriate defensive measures. Elena prepared for the engagement that would define the remainder of her mission, checking her equipment one final time, while calculating angles and approaches that would maximize her tactical advantages during the critical seconds when surprise remained on her side. The moment of truth was approaching with the inevitability of dawn, and she would meet it with the lethal precision that had carried her through every challenge of this deadly night. The sound of rapid footsteps ascending the staircase shattered Elena's tactical timeline. The guard had discovered the eliminated communications personnel far sooner than expected, his panicked voice echoing through the building as he shouted warnings in Arabic about intruders and compromised security. Elena heard Al-Rashid's immediate response from within the office, his commands sharp and precise as he ordered his men to secure all entrances and establish defensive positions. The carefully orchestrated stealth infiltration had collapsed into the worst possible scenario, a sustained firefight against superior numbers in enemy-controlled terrain. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elena's position became untenable within seconds. The office door slammed shut, followed by the metallic sounds of multiple weapons being readied for combat. She could hear chairs scraping across the floor as Al-Rashid's associates took cover behind furniture, their movements coordinated and disciplined rather than panicked. These were experienced fighters who had prepared for exactly this contingency, transforming their meeting room into a hardened defensive position while Elena remained exposed in the corridor with limited cover and no escape route. The guard's voice grew louder as he reached the second floor, joined by additional personnel who had responded to his alarm calls. Elena counted at least 3 distinct voices, possibly 4, all speaking with the urgent clarity of professional soldiers reacting to contact. They were coordinating search patterns and establishing fields of fire, their tactical communication indicating military training and combat experience that would make them formidable opponents in close-quarters battle. Elena attempted to retreat toward the staircase, but discovered that her escape route had been cut off by additional guards ascending from the ground floor. She was trapped on the second floor with hostile forces approaching from multiple directions and no immediately available concealment that would provide adequate protection against sustained small arms fire. Her night vision equipment revealed muzzle flashes from weapons being test-fired, confirming that her opponents were armed with automatic weapons capable of overwhelming her defensive capabilities through sheer volume of fire. The building's emergency lighting system activated, flooding the corridors with harsh illumination that eliminated Elena's visual advantages while providing her opponents with clear sightlines for engaging targets. The sudden transition from darkness to artificial daylight temporarily compromised her night-adapted vision, forcing her to rely on peripheral awareness and sound discrimination to track enemy movements. She removed her night vision equipment and allowed her eyes to adjust to the new lighting conditions. Precious seconds during which she remained vulnerable to detection and engagement. Al-Rashid's voice penetrated the office door, speaking rapidly into what sounded like a radio or telephone, apparently coordinating with external forces that would arrive as reinforcements. Elena realized that her mission window was collapsing far more rapidly than she had calculated. Even if she could eliminate Al-Rashid and his immediate associates, additional personnel would arrive within minutes, transforming her exfiltration into a running battle against overwhelming odds across hostile terrain. The tactical situation deteriorated further when Elena heard the distinctive sound of a crew-served weapon being positioned in the corridor behind her. The metallic clinking of ammunition belts and the mechanical sounds of a machine gun being assembled indicated that her opponents were deploying heavy weapons capable of penetrating any cover the building structure might provide. She would be facing not just individual riflemen, but coordinated fire teams equipped with weapons designed for sustained suppressive fire. Elena's ammunition situation became critical as she realized the scope of resistance she would face. Her calculated ammunition loads had been based on engaging a specific number of targets during a brief infiltration, not sustaining prolonged combat against reinforced defensive positions. She conducted a rapid inventory of her remaining magazines, confirming that she possessed sufficient ammunition for perhaps 3 or 4 minutes of intensive combat, assuming perfect accuracy and no wastage on suppressive fire or emergency reloading. Behind the office door indicated that Al-Rashid's group was preparing for a coordinated breakout rather than remaining in defensive positions. Elena heard furniture being moved away from the door and weapons being checked in preparation for aggressive action. She realized that her targets intended to take the initiative, using their numerical superiority and intimate knowledge of the building's layout to overwhelm her position before she could adapt to the changed tactical circumstances. The sound of breaking glass from multiple directions indicated that additional personnel were entering the building through windows and alternative access points, expanding the threat beyond the forces Elena had already identified. Her situational awareness expanded to include potential threats from previously secure areas, requiring her to monitor additional angles while maintaining readiness to engage targets approaching from known positions. The compound's security response was more comprehensive and better coordinated than intelligence assessments had predicted. Elena attempted to use the building's modified layout to her advantage, identifying a storage room that might provide temporary concealment while she reassessed her tactical options. She moved toward this position, but discovered that the room was already occupied by armed personnel who had anticipated her movement and positioned themselves to intercept her retreat. Muzzle flashes erupted from the doorway as her opponents opened fire, forcing Elena to throw herself against the corridor wall to avoid incoming rounds that splintered the wooden paneling around her head. The engagement escalated to sustained automatic weapons fire from multiple positions, with Elena's opponents coordinating their fire to prevent her from moving to more advantageous positions. She returned fire with controlled bursts, forcing her attackers to seek cover while she attempted to identify escape routes or tactical advantages that might allow her to regain initiative. Her suppressed weapon provided minimal acoustic advantages in the confined space, its sound signature overwhelmed by the unsuppressed weapons being employed against her. Elena's tactical radio crackled to life, carrying garbled transmissions that suggested external forces were attempting to contact her despite the communications blackout protocols. She could distinguish fragments of Alpha Team's voice procedures mixed with interference that indicated enemy attempts to jam coalition frequencies. The partial communications confirmed that her support elements were aware of her compromised situation but provided no immediate tactical assistance or extraction options. The office door burst open as Al-Rashid's group executed their planned breakout, 6 armed men moving with coordinated precision toward prepared positions, that would allow them to engage Elena from multiple angles simultaneously. She caught a brief glimpse of Al-Rashid himself, recognizable from intelligence photographs, as he moved under the protection of his bodyguards toward what appeared to be a prepared escape route. The primary target was attempting to exfiltrate while his security personnel engaged Elena in sustained combat. Elena's position became completely untenable as automatic weapons fire converged on her location from 3 separate directions. The corridor's wooden construction provided minimal ballistic protection, with incoming rounds penetrating walls and ricocheting unpredictably through the confined space. She was forced to move constantly to avoid concentrated fire, making accurate return shots nearly impossible while her opponents maintained steady pressure through coordinated fire and movement. Her equipment suffered damage from near misses and debris, with her primary optic cracked by a ricocheting fragment and her communications equipment rendered inoperative by what appeared to be a direct hit from small arms fire. Elena was effectively cut off from external support and fighting, with degraded equipment against opponents who possessed every tactical advantage except individual training and determination. The building's structure began showing signs of damage from sustained weapons fire, with wooden support beams splintering and plaster falling from walls that had been repeatedly impacted by high-velocity projectiles. Elena realized that the extended firefight was compromising the building's structural integrity, creating the possibility of partial collapse that would trap her beneath debris while her opponents escaped to continue their planned operations. Against coalition forces, Elena found herself pressed against an interior wall with incoming fire from multiple directions, her ammunition running dangerously low, her equipment damaged, and her primary target escaping under the protection of superior numbers. The mission appeared to have failed catastrophically, with Elena facing the choice between attempting a desperate last stand or seeking immediate exfiltration that would allow Al-Rashid to complete his planned attacks against coalition installations. Elena's mind shifted into the hyper-analytical state she had developed during countless training scenarios, her consciousness expanding beyond the immediate chaos of gunfire and shouting voices to encompass the entire tactical puzzle surrounding her. The knowledge she had accumulated during her infiltration suddenly crystallized into actionable intelligence. The building's modified layout that had seemed like obstacles now represented opportunities. The electronic systems she had studied became potential weapons, and the very security measures designed to protect Al-Rashid could be turned against his forces. She recalled the emergency lighting system's control panel she had observed during her initial reconnaissance, located in the communications room, where she had eliminated the first 2 targets. The system was designed to provide illumination during security emergencies, but Elena realized it could be manipulated to create tactical advantages rather than simply revealing positions. If she could reach the control room and modify the lighting patterns, she could create alternating zones of illumination and darkness that would disrupt her opponent's coordination while providing concealment for her own movements. The automatic weapons fire slackened momentarily as her attackers reloaded their weapons, providing Elena with the brief window she needed to execute her first tactical adaptation. Instead of seeking cover or attempting to return fire from her compromised position, she moved aggressively toward the source of the heaviest resistance, using the unexpected direction of her movement to create confusion among opponents who expected her to retreat or seek concealment. Elena's approach took her directly toward the machine gun position that had been established to control the main corridor. The weapons crew had positioned themselves to engage targets moving away from Al-Rashid's office, not to defend against assault from their flank. She reached their position during the critical seconds when they were focused on reloading their weapon, eliminating both crew members with precisely aimed shots that left the heavy weapon intact but uncrewed. She immediately repositioned the machine gun to face the opposite direction, transforming it from a weapon system designed to trap her into a tool for controlling enemy movement. The psychological impact on her opponents was immediate and dramatic. The sound of their own crew-served weapon firing in the opposite direction created confusion about Elena's location and capabilities, while forcing them to reconsider their tactical assumptions about her remaining combat power. Elena used the machine gun's suppressive fire to break contact with the forces that had surrounded her, moving rapidly through the building's modified corridors, while her opponents attempted to reorganize their defensive positions. Her knowledge of the building's layout, gained during her careful infiltration, now provided decisive advantages as she navigated between rooms and passages that her opponents assumed were secured or impassable. The communications room remained exactly as Elena had left it, with the electronic equipment still powered and functional despite the ongoing firefight. She accessed the emergency lighting control system and began systematically disabling illumination in specific zones while maintaining power to others, creating a pattern of light and shadow that would channel enemy movement into predictable routes while providing concealment for her own tactical repositioning. Elena's manipulation of the lighting system revealed the depth of tactical thinking that her critics had failed to recognize. While other operators might have relied on superior firepower or aggressive assault tactics, Elena was using environmental control and psychological manipulation to achieve effects that could not be obtained through conventional combat methods. The building itself had become her weapon, its systems and structures serving her tactical objectives rather than protecting her opponents. The modified lighting patterns created immediate confusion among Al-Rashid's forces, who found themselves illuminated in some areas while their intended firing positions were plunged into darkness. Elena could hear their voices as they attempted to coordinate movement through the altered environment, their commands revealing uncertainty about her location and intentions. The psychological advantage was shifting in her favor as her opponents struggled to adapt to conditions they had not anticipated. Elena retrieved additional equipment from the communications room, including electronic devices that she had not needed during her initial infiltration, but which now provided tactical opportunities she had not previously considered. A portable radio jammer would disrupt enemy communications while leaving her own backup frequency intact. Signal flares could create temporary illumination or serve as distractions during critical movements. Even the laptop computers contained files that revealed detailed information about the compound security procedures and personnel. Assignments. Her study of Al-Rashid's operational documents during her earlier infiltration now provided critical intelligence about his likely escape routes and backup positions. Elena realized that his apparent retreat from the office had followed predetermined protocols designed to move high-value personnel to secure locations during emergencies. Instead of fleeing randomly, Al-Rashid was following specific procedures that Elena could anticipate and potentially intercept. The architectural drawings she had memorized revealed that the building's basement contained a tunnel system that connected to external structures, providing covert evacuation routes that would not be visible to external observers. Al-Rashid's movement toward what she had assumed was a prepared defensive position was actually the beginning of an organized withdrawal designed to preserve leadership personnel while sacrificing security forces to delay pursuit. Elena adapted her tactical approach to account for this new understanding, abandoning her attempts to engage Al-Rashid's protective detail in sustained combat and instead focusing on intercepting his escape route before he could reach the tunnel system. This required her to move through sections of the building that were heavily defended while avoiding the type of prolonged firefight that would delay her arrival at the critical interception point. She used her knowledge of the building's electronic systems to create additional diversions, activating fire suppression systems that filled key corridors with dense fog while triggering security alarms that masked the sounds of her movement. The compound's sophisticated security systems, designed to protect against external threats, became tools for internal disruption when manipulated by someone who understood their operational parameters. Elena's movement through the chaos she had created demonstrated the tactical principles that had made her effective despite her colleagues' doubts about her aggressive capabilities. Instead of relying on overwhelming firepower, she was using precision, timing, and environmental awareness to achieve objectives that conventional assault tactics could not accomplish. Every system she manipulated, every route she chose, every tactical decision reflected careful analysis rather than instinctive aggression. The basement access point was located exactly where the architectural drawings had indicated, concealed behind a false wall in what appeared to be a storage closet. Elena could hear movement beyond the concealed entrance, confirming that Al-Rashid and his remaining associates were following their predetermined evacuation protocol. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they would complete their transit through the tunnel system and emerge at an external location where interception would become significantly more difficult. Elena prepared her final approach by conducting a systematic check of her remaining equipment and ammunition, confirming that she possessed sufficient resources to complete the engagement while accounting for the tactical challenges presented by underground combat in unfamiliar terrain. The tunnel system would favor defenders who knew its layout, but Elena's night vision capabilities and suppressed weapons would provide advantages in the confined environment. She accessed the tunnel entrance and began her pursuit of Al-Rashid's group, moving through darkness that was absolute except for the artificial illumination provided by her electronic equipment. The tunnel was concrete-lined and professionally constructed, indicating significant investment in escape infrastructure that confirmed Al-Rashid's importance to insurgent operations throughout the region. Elena could hear voices ahead, their Arabic conversation revealing that Al-Rashid's group was moving rapidly, but not yet aware that they were being pursued through their supposedly secure evacuation route. The acoustic properties of the tunnel would work in Elena's favor, allowing her to track their movement while her own approach remained undetected due to her superior noise discipline and specialized equipment. The final confrontation was approaching, and Elena had transformed a catastrophic tactical failure into a controlled pursuit that would allow her to engage her primary target under conditions that favored her training and capabilities rather than her opponent's numerical superiority and defensive preparations. The compound that had nearly become her tomb was now serving as the stage for her ultimate vindication. The tunnel stretched ahead in perfect darkness, its concrete walls channeling sound with acoustic precision that transformed every footstep and whispered word into tactical intelligence. Elena moved through the subterranean passage with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years mastering movement in confined spaces, her night vision equipment painting the environment in stark green clarity while her opponents struggled through absolute blackness. The advantage she had fought to create throughout the night now manifested as complete sensory superiority in terrain that favored her specialized training. Al-Rashid's voice carried clearly through the tunnel's acoustic properties, his commands revealing increasing desperation as he urged his remaining bodyguards to accelerate their pace toward the exit point. Elena counted 4 distinct voices, including Al-Rashid himself, confirming that his protective detail had been reduced to 3 personnel during the building engagement. These survivors represented the most experienced and capable of his security force, men who had earned their positions through demonstrated skill in close-quarters combat and personal protection procedures. Elena closed the distance with systematic precision, using the tunnel's architectural features to mask her approach while maintaining constant awareness of her target's positions and movement patterns. The passage included several sharp turns that had been designed to prevent direct fire from either entrance, but these same features provided concealment that allowed Elena to approach within engagement range without detection. Her suppressed weapon would provide decisive advantages in the confined space, where muzzle flash and acoustic signature would be magnified for unsuppressed firearms. The tunnel's construction revealed professional engineering that indicated Al-Rashid's operation possessed resources and technical expertise far beyond typical insurgent capabilities. Ventilation systems maintained breathable air throughout the passage, while electrical conduits suggested that communications equipment or emergency lighting could be activated if needed. Elena photographed these details using her specialized camera, gathering intelligence that would prove valuable for understanding the scope and sophistication of enemy infrastructure. She reached the first sharp turn and discovered that Al-Rashid's group had stopped approximately 30 meters ahead, their voices indicating they were conducting some type of security check or equipment preparation. Elena used the pause to conduct her own final preparations, confirming ammunition loads and verifying that her equipment remained properly secured for close-quarters combat. The engagement that would determine the mission's success was imminent, and she intended to execute it with the flawless precision that had characterized her entire approach to the operation. Through her advanced hearing protection, Elena detected the metallic sounds of weapons being prepared for combat, suggesting that Al-Rashid's bodyguards were establishing defensive positions to cover his continued movement toward the exit. This tactical decision indicated professional training and discipline, but also revealed that they remained unaware of Elena's presence and capabilities. They were preparing to defend against pursuit they expected, rather than the surgical elimination that was approaching from their rear. Elena identified the optimal engagement sequence by analyzing the acoustic patterns of her target's conversations and movement. Al-Rashid remained in the center of the group, protected by bodyguards who had positioned themselves to provide overlapping fields of fire while maintaining the ability to facilitate his continued escape. She would need to eliminate the protective detail simultaneously to prevent any of them from executing defensive protocols that might allow Al-Rashid to reach the tunnel exit. The engagement began with Elena's activation of a diversionary device she had prepared during her equipment check, a small electronic noisemaker thrown beyond her target's position created the sound signature of someone approaching from the tunnel exit rather than from their rear. Al-Rashid's bodyguards immediately oriented their weapons toward the false threat, presenting Elena with optimal target angles while their attention was focused away from her actual position. Elena eliminated the 3 bodyguards in rapid succession, her suppressed weapon cycling with mechanical precision as subsonic projectiles found their targets with surgical accuracy. The engagement lasted less than 4 seconds from initiation to completion, with each target eliminated before they could process the reality of their tactical situation or respond with defensive measures. Al-Rashid found himself alone in the tunnel with an opponent he had never seen, protected only by his own sidearm and whatever personal combat skills he possessed. The confrontation with Al-Rashid himself proved anticlimactic compared to the sustained combat Elena had endured throughout the night. The man who had orchestrated attacks against coalition forces, who had commanded respect and fear throughout the region's insurgent networks, proved to be a tactician rather than a warrior when faced with direct personal combat. His surrender attempt was brief and unconvincing, followed by a desperate but ineffective effort to engage Elena with his personal weapon. Elena eliminated Al-Rashid with the same clinical precision she had applied to every other target throughout the mission. There was no dramatic confrontation, no exchange of ideological rhetoric, no moment of mutual recognition between professional adversaries. Simply the efficient application of lethal force against a high-value target who had exhausted his tactical options and protective resources. The primary objective of her mission was complete. She immediately began the methodical process of confirming target elimination and gathering intelligence materials that Al-Rashid had carried during his attempted escape. His personal documents included operational plans that exceeded even the ambitious scope revealed during Elena's surveillance of the office meeting. Instead of coordinating attacks against 3 coalition bases, Al-Rashid had been planning simultaneous Operations against 7 separate installations. Using resources and personnel networks that would have represented the most significant insurgent offensive in the region's recent history, Elena photographed all relevant documents and secured Al-Rashid's personal communication devices, which contained contact information for insurgent cells operating across 4 different provinces. The intelligence value of these materials would provide coalition forces with actionable information for months of follow-up operations, potentially disrupting enemy activities far beyond the immediate tactical objectives of her current mission. Tunnel exit emerged into a storage facility that appeared to be a legitimate commercial enterprise, its exterior appearance providing perfect concealment for clandestine activities. Elena conducted a rapid security sweep of the facility before establishing communications with Alpha Team, using her backup radio equipment to transmit mission completion codes and request extraction coordination. Her transmission included preliminary intelligence assessments that would allow higher command elements to begin exploitation of the captured materials. Immediately, Elena's systematic count of eliminated targets confirmed the complete success of her mission parameters. 12 enemy personnel had been eliminated during the night's operations, 2 guards during her initial perimeter infiltration, 2 communications specialists in the main building, 3 bodyguards and Al-Rashid himself in the tunnel, and 4 additional security personnel during the sustained engagement in the building's upper level. The elimination had been achieved through tactical precision rather than overwhelming firepower, using techniques that minimized collateral damage while maximizing operational effectiveness. The sunrise was beginning to illuminate the eastern horizon as Elena completed her intelligence gathering and prepared for extraction. The night that had begun with whispered doubts about her capability had concluded with the elimination of one of the region's most significant insurgent leaders, and the disruption of planned attacks that would have resulted in hundreds of coalition casualties. The critics who had questioned her lethality would never again doubt the deadly precision that lay beneath her professional restraint. Elena established her extraction beacon and settled into a concealed position to await the arrival of recovery forces, her mission complete and her reputation permanently established. The compound behind her was silent now, its security systems disabled and its personnel eliminated with surgical precision. Al-Rashid's planned offensive would never materialize. His networks would be systematically dismantled using the intelligence she had gathered, and the coalition bases he had targeted would remain secure. The night had proven that Elena's apparent softness masked something far more dangerous than conventional aggression, the absolute lethality of someone who killed not from anger or excitement, but from professional necessity applied with mathematical precision. 12 enemies had discovered too late that underestimating Elena Vasquez was a fatal mistake. They would never have the opportunity to repeat. The extraction helicopter materialized from the dawn haze with rotors that barely whispered against the morning air, its modified acoustics designed for operations where stealth remained critical, even during recovery phases. Elena heard the aircraft long before it became visible, her trained ear distinguishing the signature of friendly rotorcraft from the heavier signatures of enemy aircraft that might respond to reports of overnight contact. She activated her infrared beacon and moved to the designated pickup zone, her movements still controlled and purposeful despite 12 hours of sustained tactical operations. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the helicopter's cargo compartment before the aircraft had fully settled onto the improvised landing zone, his facial expression unreadable behind tactical eyewear, but his body language indicating the heightened alertness of someone expecting immediate contact. Elena observed his reaction as she approached the aircraft, noting the way his eyes tracked across her equipment and uniform, cataloging damage and assessing her physical condition with the practiced evaluation of an experienced operator. She handed Rodriguez the intelligence materials she had gathered during the mission, transferring custody of documents and electronic devices without ceremony or explanation. The materials spoke for themselves. Operational plans for coordinated attacks against 7 coalition installations, personnel rosters for insurgent cells operating across multiple provinces, communication protocols that would allow intelligence analysts to monitor enemy activities for months. Rodriguez's expression shifted as he quickly examined the captured materials, his assessment of their intelligence value immediately apparent in his posture and handling procedures. Elena climbed aboard the helicopter and secured herself in the cargo compartment, her equipment properly stowed and her weapon condition verified according to standard operating procedures. Martinez and Thompson occupied seats across from her, their faces reflecting the complex mixture of professional respect and personal reassessment that occurred when assumptions about colleague capabilities were proven dramatically incorrect. Neither man spoke during the initial phases of the flight, their silence reflecting the processing of information that challenged previously held beliefs about Elena's operational effectiveness. The flight back to base provided Elena with her first opportunity in 14 hours to conduct systematic equipment maintenance and personal hygiene procedures. She cleaned and inspected her weapons, documented ammunition expenditure, and completed preliminary after-action reports that would provide the foundation for detailed mission debriefings. Her actions were methodical and routine, the same procedures she performed after every operation, regardless of its scope or intensity. Captain Reyes met the helicopter at the designated landing area, his presence indicating that preliminary reports of the mission's success had already reached command levels. Elena transferred the intelligence materials directly to Reyes, providing a brief verbal summary of the captured documents and their potential operational value. Her report was concise and factual, focusing on actionable intelligence rather than tactical details of the mission's execution. The debriefing session took place in the same windowless room where Elena had received her mission briefing 26 hours earlier, but the atmosphere was fundamentally different. Colonel Matthews presided over the session with the quiet attention of someone reviewing an operation that had exceeded all expectations, while intelligence specialists documented every detail of Elena's infiltration and the materials she had recovered. The questions were technical rather than evaluative, seeking to understand tactical procedures that could be applied to future operations. Elena's account of the mission focused on operational details rather than personal accomplishments, describing infiltration techniques, enemy security measures, and tactical adaptations without emphasizing the individual skill required to execute such procedures under combat conditions. Her presentation style remained consistent with her previous briefings, professional and understated despite the extraordinary nature of the operation she was describing. The intelligence assessment of Al-Rashid's captured materials revealed the broader significance of Elena's mission success. His planned coordinated offensive would have represented the most significant insurgent operation in the region's recent history, potentially resulting in hundreds of coalition casualties and the temporary disruption of critical military installations. Elena's elimination of Al-Rashid and his senior associates had prevented this offensive while providing intelligence that would allow proactive operations against remaining insurgent networks. Rodriguez approached Elena privately after the formal debriefing concluded, his demeanor reflecting the professional acknowledgement of someone whose tactical assessments had been proven incorrect by operational reality. He made no explicit apology for his previous criticism, but his discussion of Elena's future assignment possibilities indicated a fundamental revision of his evaluation of her capabilities. The conversation was brief and professional, focused on operational considerations rather than personal relationships. Elena returned to her quarters and began the routine procedures that followed every extended operation: equipment cleaning and inspection, personal hygiene and medical self-assessment, documentation of lessons learned and procedural modifications. Her actions were identical to those she performed after routine patrol missions, reflecting her understanding that tactical excellence required consistent attention to fundamental procedures, regardless of mission complexity or significance. Base Communications Center received confirmation during the following days that Al-Rashid's elimination had created immediate disruption throughout regional insurgent networks. Planned operations were canceled, coordination meetings were postponed, and known associates began implementing security protocols that indicated awareness of compromised operational security. Elena's single-night operation had achieved strategic effects that extended far beyond the tactical elimination of one high-value target. Elena's next mission assignment came through normal channels without special recognition or modified procedures, indicating that her demonstrated capabilities had been absorbed into routine personnel management decisions rather than treated as exceptional circumstances requiring special handling. She received the assignment briefing with the same professional attention she applied to all operational planning, asking technical questions about enemy capabilities and terrain factors rather than seeking acknowledgement of her previous missions. Success. The training schedule resumed its normal pattern, with Elena participating in team exercises and skill maintenance sessions, alongside operators who had previously questioned her aggressive capabilities. The atmosphere during these sessions reflected subtle but permanent changes in professional relationships, with Elena's tactical recommendations receiving immediate attention, rather than the skeptical evaluation that had characterized previous interactions. Martinez requested Elena's assistance with planning an upcoming reconnaissance mission, seeking her expertise in infiltration techniques and equipment selection. The consultation was conducted as a routine professional interaction, but represented a complete reversal of previous attitudes about Elena's tactical value and operational contributions. She provided detailed recommendations about approach routes and equipment configurations, her advice sought rather than offered. Elena's efficiency reports reflected her consistent performance standards without special recognition of the Al-Rashid operation, indicating that extraordinary tactical achievements were being evaluated within the context of routine professional excellence rather than exceptional circumstances. Her evaluation ratings remained consistently high, but within the normal range for experienced special operations personnel rather than the elevated categories reserved for decorated personnel. The compound where Elena had eliminated 12 enemy personnel in a single night was abandoned within days of Al-Rashid's death, its remaining occupants scattering to alternative locations throughout the region. Intelligence surveillance of the facility confirmed that it would never again serve as a coordination center for insurgent activities, its strategic value eliminated along with the leadership personnel who had operated from its secured facilities. Elena continued her operational duties with the same professional competence that had characterized her service before the Al-Rashid mission, her performance consistent and reliable regardless of mission parameters or tactical challenges. Colleagues who observed her during subsequent operations noted no change in her demeanor or procedures, her tactical approach remaining methodical and precise rather than influenced by previous success or recognition. The whispered criticisms about Elena being too soft for special operations work simply ceased, replaced by routine professional interactions that reflected acceptance of her capabilities, without dramatic acknowledgement or special recognition. She had proven her lethality definitively, and the matter required no further discussion or evaluation. Elena Vasquez was simply who she had always been, a consummate professional whose apparent gentleness masked absolute precision in the application of lethal force when operational requirements demanded such measures. 3 weeks after the Al-Rashid operation, Elena found herself in a classified briefing room beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by general officers and senior intelligence officials whose combined years of experience represented decades of American military operations in hostile territories. The room's atmosphere was thick with the tension that accompanied strategic-level decision-making, where individual tactical successes were evaluated for their potential to influence broader campaign objectives and regional stability. General Patricia Hawkins, commander of Special Operations Command Central, had requested Elena's presence specifically to provide tactical insights that could only come from someone who had successfully penetrated and eliminated a sophisticated insurgent. Command structure. Elena sat at the polished conference table with the same composed demeanor she maintained during routine mission briefings, her uniform bearing no special insignia or recognition that would indicate her recent operational achievements. The intelligence materials Elena had recovered from Al-Rashid's compound had revealed connections between insurgent networks that extended far beyond Afghanistan's borders, creating a complex web of coordination and resource sharing that threatened coalition operations across multiple theaters. Syrian-trained operatives were providing technical expertise to Taliban bomb makers, while Yemeni specialists in maritime operations were sharing knowledge with Pakistani groups planning attacks against coalition naval assets. Elena's detailed debriefing about Al-Rashid's security procedures had provided insights that intelligence analysts were applying to assessments of similar, high-value targets throughout the region. Her observations about electronic security systems, personnel rotation schedules, and architectural modifications were being compiled into tactical guidance that would inform future special operations, missions against fortified compounds, and protected leadership facilities. Colonel Sarah Chun, representing the Defense Intelligence Agency, presented analysis indicating that Elena's elimination of Al-Rashid had created a leadership vacuum that was being filled by competing factions, whose internal conflicts were disrupting planned operations against coalition forces. 3 separate insurgent groups were claiming authority over Al-Rashid's former area of operations, their disputes consuming resources and attention that would otherwise be directed toward attacks against coalition installations. The strategic implications extended beyond immediate tactical advantages. Al-Rashid's communication networks, compromised through Elena's intelligence gathering, had provided coalition forces with unprecedented insight into insurgent command structures and operational planning procedures. Dozens of planned attacks had been preempted through actionable intelligence derived from documents and electronic devices Elena had recovered during her infiltration. Elena answered technical questions about infiltration procedures and enemy security measures with the same professional precision she applied to all operational discussions, focusing on factual details rather than dramatic narrative elements. Her responses provided information that would directly influence the planning and execution of similar missions throughout the region, her tactical expertise contributing to strategic decisions that would affect thousands of coalition personnel. General Hawkins announced that Elena would be assigned to a new position within the Special Operations Command's Training Directorate, where her demonstrated expertise in solo infiltration operations would be used to develop enhanced training programs for special operations personnel. The assignment represented recognition of her tactical capabilities, while providing opportunities to influence operational procedures across multiple units and commands. Elena's new responsibilities included developing infiltration training scenarios based on her recent operational experiences, creating tactical guidance for engaging fortified positions with minimal personnel, and evaluating proposed modifications to equipment and procedures used by special operations forces. Her work would directly influence the training and capabilities of operators who would face similar challenges in future missions against sophisticated enemy security arrangements. The training facility at Fort Bragg had been modified to accommodate Elena's specialized instruction programs, with realistic urban environments and electronic security systems that replicated the challenges operators would encounter during actual missions. Elena supervised the construction of training scenarios that incorporated lessons learned from her Al-Rashid operation, ensuring that future operators would benefit from her hard-won tactical knowledge. Elena's first training cycle included 12 experienced special operations personnel who had been selected for advanced infiltration training based on their demonstrated capabilities and potential for solo operations. She conducted the training with the same methodical approach she applied to actual missions, emphasizing technical precision and tactical discipline rather than aggressive assault techniques that relied on overwhelming firepower. The trainees initially approached Elena's instruction with the skepticism that experienced operators typically displayed toward new procedures and untested trainers. However, their attitudes shifted rapidly as Elena demonstrated infiltration techniques that exceeded their previous capabilities and tactical understanding. Her ability to defeat electronic security systems, navigate complex architectural layouts, and eliminate multiple targets without detection provided practical skills that immediately enhanced their operational effectiveness. Elena's training methodology emphasized the psychological aspects of solo operations that were often overlooked in conventional special operations training. She taught techniques for maintaining tactical awareness during extended periods of isolation, managing stress and decision-making processes when support was unavailable, and adapting tactical plans based on real-time intelligence gathered during infiltration activities. The first operational application of Elena's enhanced training procedures occurred during a mission against a high-value target in Syria, where one of her former trainees successfully eliminated an insurgent financier. Using techniques directly derived from Elena's Al-Rashid operation, the mission's success validated Elena's training approach while demonstrating the broader applicability of tactics developed through her unique operational experiences. Elena's influence extended beyond individual training programs to encompass equipment development and tactical doctrine modification. Her recommendations for improved suppressed weapon systems, enhanced night vision equipment, and specialized infiltration tools were being incorporated into procurement programs that would affect special operations capabilities throughout the military special operations community. The intelligence community continued to exploit materials Elena had recovered from Al-Rashid's compound, with new revelations emerging monthly about insurgent networks and planned operations that had been disrupted through her tactical success. Her single night's work had provided intelligence dividends that exceeded the combined results of months of conventional intelligence gathering operations. Elena received assignment orders for a new operational deployment that would allow her to apply her enhanced training and tactical development work to direct combat operations against high-value targets in contested territories. The assignment represented a return to operational duties while maintaining her responsibilities for training and doctrine development, allowing her to continue refining tactical procedures through practical application. Her departure from the training facility was marked by the same professional courtesy that characterized all her military interactions, with no special ceremonies or recognition events that might distinguish her achievements from routine personnel rotations. Elena packed her equipment and prepared for deployment with the systematic thoroughness that had characterized every aspect of her military service. The aircraft that carried Elena toward her new assignment flew through darkness that reminded her of the night she had eliminated Al-Rashid and his 12 associates, but her thoughts remained focused on future missions rather than past achievements. She had proven her capabilities definitively, established her professional reputation through demonstrated results, and earned the respect of colleagues who had once questioned her tactical effectiveness. Elena reviewed mission briefings and equipment inventories with the same attention to detail she had always applied to operational preparation, her approach unchanged by recognition or success. She remained exactly who she had always been, a professional soldier whose apparent gentleness masked absolute lethality when operational requirements demanded such precision, ready to apply her deadly skills wherever America's strategic interests required the elimination of high-value targets through surgical tactical operations. The transport aircraft descended through mountain passes that carved jagged silhouettes against a star-filled Afghan sky, its engines throttled back to minimize acoustic signature while navigating terrain that had claimed dozens of coalition aircraft during the previous decade of sustained operations. Elena sat in the cargo compartment with 11 other special operations personnel, her equipment secured according to standard procedures while her mind processed intelligence briefings that detailed her new area of operations and the high-value targets that awaited elimination. Forward Operating Base Restrepo occupied a precarious position on a ridgeline that provided commanding views of valley approaches while remaining vulnerable to indirect fire from higher elevations controlled by enemy forces. The base's defensive positions had been carved from solid rock using explosives and heavy machinery, creating fortified positions that could withstand sustained assault while providing platforms for the sophisticated surveillance equipment that monitored enemy movement across hundreds of square kilometers of contested territory. Elena's new unit, Operational Detachment Alpha 7349, specialized in deep reconnaissance missions that required extended periods of isolation in enemy-controlled territory, while gathering intelligence about insurgent activities and eliminating high-value targets when opportunities presented themselves. The detachment's operational area encompassed 3 provinces where traditional military operations had proven ineffective against insurgent networks that utilized intimate terrain knowledge and civilian population support to avoid conventional engagement. Master Sergeant Kevin Morrison, the detachment's senior enlisted leader, conducted Elena's initial briefing in an underground bunker that had been constructed to withstand direct mortar strikes while providing secure communications with higher command echelons. Morrison's weathered features and methodical briefing style reflected 23 years of special operations experience, including multiple deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, and other classified theaters where American forces conducted counterterrorism operations. Morrison explained that Elena's reputation for solo infiltration operations had preceded her arrival, with intelligence personnel specifically requesting her assignment to support missions against targets that conventional team operations could not effectively engage. Her demonstrated ability to penetrate sophisticated security arrangements and eliminate multiple high-value targets during single operations had created opportunities for missions that would have been impossible with traditional tactical approaches. The immediate operational priority involved a network of insurgent bomb makers who had developed improvised explosive devices that were specifically designed to defeat coalition vehicle armor and electronic countermeasure systems. Intelligence indicated that the network operated from a fortified compound in the Korengal Valley, protected by terrain features and security arrangements that had prevented successful coalition operations, despite multiple previous attempts involving conventional forces and airstrikes. Elena's mission parameters required her to infiltrate the bomb-making facility, gather intelligence about device construction techniques and distribution networks, eliminate key personnel responsible for technical development, and destroy manufacturing equipment that could not be easily replaced. The operation would be conducted without support elements, requiring Elena to operate independently in territory where coalition forces had limited presence and no immediate extraction capabilities. The intelligence briefing revealed that the target facility housed between 15 and 20 insurgent personnel, including foreign fighters who possessed technical expertise in advanced explosive device construction and electronic warfare techniques. The facility's security arrangements included early warning systems, hardened defensive positions, and communication equipment That would allow rapid coordination with supporting insurgent forces throughout the valley if coalition operations were detected. Elena spent 3 days conducting detailed mission planning, studying satellite imagery and intelligence reports, while developing infiltration routes and contingency procedures that would maximize her tactical advantages while minimizing exposure to detection and enemy response. Her planning process incorporated lessons learned from the Al-Rashid operation, including techniques for defeating electronic security systems and eliminating multiple targets without triggering general alarm conditions. The infiltration began at 2300 hours on a moonless night when atmospheric conditions provided optimal concealment for extended movement across terrain that offered minimal natural cover. Elena departed the forward operating base, carrying specialized equipment that had been modified based on recommendations from her previous operations, including enhanced suppressed weapon systems and electronic countermeasure devices that reflected the latest technological developments in special operations equipment. Elena's route to the target facility required 12 kilometers of movement through terrain that insurgent forces had extensively prepared for defensive operations against coalition forces. The approach included crossing 3 ridgelines that provided elevated observation positions, navigating through 2 villages where insurgent sympathizers maintained surveillance networks, and traversing a river valley where seasonal flooding had created muddy conditions that would retain footprints and other evidence of coalition presence. The first village presented challenges that required Elena to modify her planned route while maintaining her operational timeline and avoiding detection by civilian populations that routinely reported coalition activities to insurgent forces. Elena utilized techniques she had developed during urban warfare training to move through populated areas without creating disturbances that would indicate military presence, including specialized movement techniques and equipment configurations that minimized visual and acoustic signatures. Elena's passage through the village revealed additional intelligence about insurgent support networks that had not appeared in previous assessments of the area's civilian population. She observed communication equipment and weapons caches that indicated significantly higher levels of insurgent organization and resource availability than intelligence reports had suggested. This information would prove valuable for future operations, but also indicated that her current mission faced greater risks and more sophisticated opposition than originally anticipated. The river crossing required Elena to utilize waterproofing procedures that protected her electronic equipment while allowing her to maintain tactical capabilities during the most vulnerable phase of her infiltration. The water was deeper and colder than expected, requiring extended submersion that tested Elena's physical conditioning and equipment reliability under conditions that had not been anticipated during mission planning. Elena emerged from the river, crossing with her equipment intact and her tactical timeline only slightly delayed, but discovered that the terrain beyond the water obstacle differed significantly from intelligence assessments derived from satellite imagery and aerial reconnaissance. The valley floor was more heavily vegetated than expected, providing superior concealment, but also creating navigation challenges that required Elena to rely on compass bearings rather than landmark recognition for route finding. The target facility appeared exactly as described in intelligence briefings, its fortified construction and defensive positioning confirming that insurgent forces had invested significant resources in creating a facility that could support sustained operations while providing protection against coalition airstrikes and ground assaults. Elena conducted detailed reconnaissance of the facility's exterior defenses, identifying guard positions, electronic security systems, and potential infiltration routes while remaining undetected by perimeter security personnel. Elena's observation of the facility revealed patterns of activity that indicated continuous operations rather than intermittent use, with personnel maintaining active schedules throughout nighttime. hours when coalition surveillance assets would be least effective. The facility's operational tempo suggested that bomb production was proceeding at rates that exceeded intelligence estimates, creating urgency for Elena's mission that had not been apparent during initial planning phases. Elena identified her optimal infiltration route through a drainage system that approached the facility from the east, utilizing terrain features and architectural elements that would provide concealment while allowing access to the facilities. Interior spaces where bomb manufacturing activities were conducted. The approach would require Elena to penetrate multiple security barriers, while avoiding detection by personnel who possessed combat experience and would respond aggressively to any indication of coalition presence. Elena's final equipment check confirmed that her gear remained fully functional, despite the challenging infiltration route and adverse environmental conditions she had encountered during her approach. Her weapon systems, communication equipment, and specialized infiltration tools were properly configured for the close-quarters operations that would determine whether her mission succeeded in eliminating this critical insurgent capability. Elena began her final approach to the target facility with the systematic precision that had characterized every aspect of her operational career. Her movements controlled and purposeful as she prepared to demonstrate once again that apparent gentleness could mask lethal precision when American strategic interests required the elimination of threats through surgical military operations. The facility ahead contained insurgent bomb makers whose activities threatened coalition forces throughout the region, and Elena intended to ensure that their operations would be permanently terminated before dawn revealed her presence to enemy forces. The drainage culvert that provided access to the bomb-making facility proved more complex than Elena's reconnaissance had suggested, with multiple branching passages that indicated an extensive underground network designed to support clandestine operations while providing emergency escape routes for high-value personnel. Elena navigated the subterranean maze using compass bearings and distance measurements, her night vision equipment revealing construction details that suggested professional engineering rather than improvised insurgent modifications. Water seepage through the concrete walls created treacherous conditions that required Elena to modify her movement techniques to maintain tactical silence while avoiding slips that could compromise her infiltration. The moisture had encouraged growth of organic material that filled the confined spaces with the smell of decay and stagnant water, creating atmospheric conditions that would mask her scent signature while potentially affecting her breathing and visual clarity during extended operations. Elena emerged from the drainage system into a storage area that housed chemical precursors and electronic components used in improvised explosive device construction, their systematic organization indicating sophisticated logistics support and technical expertise that exceeded typical insurgent capabilities. Industrial-grade materials were stored according to professional safety protocols, while electronic equipment showed evidence of recent manufacture and careful handling by personnel who understood their technical specifications and operational requirements. The facility's interior revealed a level of operational sophistication that had not been apparent from external surveillance, with multiple workstations equipped for different phases of explosive device construction and testing. Elena photographed the equipment configurations and material storage systems, gathering intelligence that would provide coalition forces with detailed understanding of insurgent manufacturing capabilities and supply chain requirements that supported their bomb-making operations. Movement patterns within the facility indicated that personnel maintained active work schedules throughout nighttime hours, with multiple individuals conducting activities that required coordination and technical expertise. Elena counted at least 6 distinct voices engaged in conversations about technical procedures and production schedules, their Arabic dialogue revealing familiarity with advanced explosive device construction techniques and electronic warfare applications that pose significant threats to coalition forces. Elena's infiltration Route took her through a corridor that connected storage areas with active manufacturing spaces, requiring her to avoid detection by personnel who were conducting routine activities rather than responding to security alerts. The facility's layout favored defenders who were familiar with its architectural features, but also created opportunities for an infiltrator who could move through the environment without triggering defensive responses or alerting occupants to unauthorized presence. The primary manufacturing area occupied a large, underground chamber that had been excavated and reinforced to provide protection against aerial surveillance and targeted strikes. Its concrete construction incorporating steel reinforcement and blast-resistant features that would allow continued operations, even after direct attacks by coalition forces. Elena observed the manufacturing process through concealed positions, documenting procedures and equipment that would provide intelligence analysts with comprehensive understanding of insurgent bomb-making capabilities. Elena identified her primary targets through careful observation of the manufacturing activities, noting individuals who demonstrated technical leadership and specialized knowledge that would be difficult to replace if they were eliminated. The facility's senior bomb maker was a middle-aged Syrian engineer who provided technical guidance while supervising less experienced personnel. His expertise evident in his detailed instructions and systematic approach to quality control procedures. 2. Foreign fighters from Chechnya provided specialized knowledge about electronic triggering systems and anti-handling devices that significantly increased the lethality of improvised explosive devices deployed against coalition forces. Their technical discussions revealed familiarity with coalition countermeasure systems and tactical procedures, suggesting that they possessed intelligence about friendly operations that had been obtained through compromised sources or technical surveillance. Elena's tactical assessment indicated that eliminating these 3 individuals would severely degrade the facility's operational capabilities, while providing immediate tactical advantages for coalition forces operating throughout the region. However, their positions within the facility and the presence of additional personnel would require precise coordination and flawless execution to prevent survivors from escaping with critical technical knowledge or alerting supporting insurgent networks. The facility's security arrangements included internal communication systems that would allow rapid coordination with external supporting forces if coalition operations were detected, requiring Elena to disable these capabilities before beginning target elimination procedures. She identified the communication equipment and backup power systems that supported internal coordination, developing plans for simultaneous disruption that would prevent effective defensive responses. Elena's ammunition assessment confirmed that she possessed sufficient resources for engaging multiple targets, while maintaining reserves for contingency situations and emergency extraction procedures. Her suppressed weapon systems were optimally configured for close-quarters operations in the confined environment, with subsonic ammunition that would minimize acoustic signatures while providing reliable terminal effectiveness against unarmored targets. Elena began her systematic elimination of the facility's technical personnel with the same methodical precision that had characterized her Al-Rashid operation, starting with targets who were isolated from the main manufacturing area and working progressively toward the senior personnel who represented the highest value tactical objectives. Each engagement was executed with surgical precision, eliminating threats without alerting other occupants to the presence of coalition forces. The Syrian engineer proved more challenging to eliminate due to his position within the main manufacturing area, where other personnel would immediately detect any disturbance or indication of hostile action. Elena developed a complex approach that utilized the facility's architectural features and manufacturing equipment to create diversions while positioning herself for optimal target engagement under conditions that would prevent immediate detection by surviving personnel. Elena's disruption of the facility's power systems created temporary confusion that allowed her to eliminate the Syrian engineer while his associates were focused on restoring electrical systems and resuming manufacturing operations. The technique required precise timing and coordination with her subsequent target elimination sequence, ensuring that each engagement built upon tactical advantages created by previous actions. The Chechen specialists proved aware of Elena's presence through their combat experience and tactical training, requiring direct engagement under conditions that favored defenders who possessed intimate knowledge of the facility's layout and defensive capabilities. Elena's superior equipment and individual training provided decisive advantages, but the engagement required maximum tactical skill and precision to prevent casualties that could compromise the mission's intelligence value. Elena's systematic destruction of manufacturing equipment and material stockpiles eliminated the facility's operational capabilities while gathering additional intelligence about supply networks and technical procedures that supported insurgent bomb-making activities throughout the region. Her documentation of materials and equipment would provide coalition forces with actionable intelligence for disrupting similar facilities and eliminating supporting infrastructure. The facility's communication equipment revealed contact information for insurgent networks operating across multiple provinces, confirming intelligence assessments about coordination between previously separate organizations and providing opportunities for follow-up operations against supporting personnel and infrastructure. Elena secured electronic devices and documentation that would support months of intelligence, exploitation, and targeted operations. Elena's exfiltration from the facility required different techniques than her infiltration approach, as the elimination of personnel and destruction of equipment had created conditions that would attract attention from supporting insurgent forces and civilian populations who provided logistic support for the bomb-making operations. She utilized alternative routes and concealment techniques that would minimize detection while allowing rapid movement toward extraction zones. The mission's completion represented another demonstration of Elena's tactical capabilities and professional effectiveness, with multiple high-value targets eliminated and critical insurgent infrastructure destroyed through precision operations that exceeded the results achievable through conventional military approaches. Elena had once again proven that her apparent softness concealed absolute lethality when American strategic interests required surgical elimination of threats through specialized military operations. 6 months later, Elena stood in the same Pentagon briefing room where her reputation had first been questioned. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. General Hawkins presented her with classified documentation that would never appear in official records, confirmation that Elena's operations had prevented 7 major attacks against coalition forces, eliminated 43 high-value targets, and disrupted insurgent networks across 4 countries. The intelligence materials Elena had gathered during her solo missions had become the foundation for an entirely new approach to counter-terrorism operations. Her techniques were being taught at every major special operations training facility, while her equipment recommendations had influenced procurement decisions worth millions of dollars. Yet Elena received this recognition with the same quiet professionalism that had characterized every aspect of her military service. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, now promoted to Master Sergeant, approached Elena after the briefing concluded. "You know, I never actually apologized for what I said about you being too soft," he admitted quietly. Elena looked at him with the same steady gaze that had preceded the elimination of 55 enemy combatants during her documented operations. "You were right, Sergeant. I am soft," she replied calmly. "Soft enough to feel every life I take. Soft enough to make sure each one is absolutely necessary. And soft enough to never become the kind of person who kills without it mattering." Rodriguez nodded slowly, finally understanding that Elena's gentleness had never been weakness. It had been the source of her extraordinary precision and devastating effectiveness. Elena walked out of the Pentagon that day exactly as she had arrived, without fanfare, without celebration. Simply a professional soldier who had redefined what it meant to be lethal in service of her country. The critics called her too soft until 12 enemies fell in a single night. What other untold stories of underestimated warriors are waiting to be revealed? Subscribe now for more incredible true stories of courage, determination, and the deadly precision that lies beneath quiet strength. Hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.